Hello there, this is Senris. In this video we will be covering the politics of the organization known as Overwatch as well as the politics of the individual members and associated groups. Overwatch is a bourgeois neoliberal think tank with a private military force formed by the United Nations to put down a slave rebellion by Omnics, which are robots created to do manual labor and manufacturing for the benefit of corporate profits. Through raids on command and control centers, cyber warfare, and assassinations, Overwatch forces were eventually able to defeat the Omnic forces, force them to sign peace treaties, and re-establish the status quo. After the war, Overwatch served as an international peacekeeping task force for several years until whispers of corruption, kidnapping, and torture started to surround the group. The most notorious death squad of the organization, Blackwatch, was eventually revealed to the public, whose operations violated the national sovereignty of many countries and included several war crimes. Eventually, a schism between Overwatch and Blackwatch led to a battle in their Swiss headquarters, leading to the destruction of said HQ and the apparent deaths of several members. Overwatch was disbanded shortly after. A generation has passed since the Omnic Uprising, referred to as the Omnic Crisis by most human historians, and while the peace has managed to be kept, tensions between the Omnics and humans have never been higher. Now let's go over the individual members of Overwatch as well as ex-members and associates. The founding members of Overwatch were Jack Morrison, Gabriel Reyes, Torbjorn Lindholm, Reinhardt Wilhelm, and Anna Amari. Jack Morrison, also known as Soldier 76, was an American soldier and leader of Overwatch, presumed dead after the destruction of Overwatch HQ. He later popped up as a vigilante, pursuing his own version of justice and trying to learn more about the events leading to the dissolution of Overwatch. He's a registered member of the Republican Party and has very neoconservative, tough-on-crime political views. He has never questioned Western imperialism, the necessity of keeping the Omnics suppressed, or the need for an unaccountable force like Overwatch to act as world police, despite their numerous scandals and disregard for international laws. He's not a young man anymore, and his zeal for meting out justice as he sees fit has only grown in his advanced age. Gabriel Reyes, also known as Reaper, was also an American soldier and friend to Soldier 76 before the schism between Overwatch and Blackwatch formed. He was the leader of Blackwatch and also presumed dead after the destruction of Overwatch HQ, but he was greatly injured and underwent experimental medical treatments to save his life, which resulted in the cells of his body to simultaneously decay and regenerate at a rapid rate, as well as the ability to become intangible. He is currently a member of Talon, an anarcho-capitalist/objectivist terrorist organization which seeks to spread conflict and turmoil throughout the world in an effort to strengthen the human race. Reaper is a dyed-in-the-wool objectivist. He keeps a copy of Atlas Shrugged on his nightstand and is a member of the Libertarian Party. Torbjorn Lindholm is a Swedish engineer and arms manufacturer. He is even more racist towards Omnics than most members of Overwatch and is very wary of AI technology as well as the technology he builds falling into the wrong hands. He reminds me of Otacon from the Metal Gear Solid series, as they both created weapons of mass destruction that they later came to regret after they saw what their inventions were capable of in the service of nefarious actors. Torbjorn has somewhat conservative social views but believes in the necessity of a strong welfare state. He used to be a member of the Swedish Social Democratic Party but switched to the Moderate Party after the SOCDEMs started supporting full immigration rights for Omnics, which Torbjorn opposes. Reinhardt Wilhelm is a German soldier and member of the Special Forces team known as the Crusaders. He fancies himself a sort of modern knight, complete with power armor, a barrier shield, and a fuck-huge hammer. He was a highly decorated and popular member of Overwatch, with most members admiring his charisma and code of ethics. He is BFFs with Torbjorn and godfather to his daughter Brigitte, who later follows in Reinhardt's footsteps to become his squire and a member of Overwatch. Reinhardt has somewhat anachronistic political views as he sees the world through a lens of knightly chivalry, and he doesn't align with any of the German political parties, although he has voted for Angela Merkel and the Christian Democratic Union due to their support of the Overwatch initiative. Anna Amari is an Egyptian soldier, elite tier sniper, and war hero. She was second in command in Overwatch, serving under Soldier 76. She was a highly effective member of the group and close friends with the other founding members. She raised her daughter Pharah to value duty and service to her country, just like her mother. Anna was a member of Overwatch long after the end of the Omnic Crisis until she was shot in the eye in a sniper battle with Widowmaker, a member of Talon, and assumed killed in action. She took months to recover and was never the same after that, although she eventually reappeared years later, which led to rocky relationships with several of her own comrades and especially her daughter Pharah, who had a hard time accepting the fact that her mother let her think she was dead for so long. Anna had quite nationalistic political views for most of her life, but after her near-death experience she couldn't care less about politics anymore. She cares far more about mending her relationships with her family and comrades than what goes on in Cairo. After the Omnic Crisis, Overwatch's popularity and approval ratings soared, and they were heralded as heroes all over the world. Due to their victory, as well as propaganda which portrayed them as liberators of humanity rather than tools of capital to preserve the profits of international robotics conglomerates, arms manufacturers, and private military contractors, many new recruits sought to join the organization. Winston is a genetically engineered gorilla from the moon. He was born on the Horizon lunar colony, where humans were experimenting on the effects of prolonged habitation in space. Winston was a special specimen in that he rapidly developed intelligence beyond that of most humans, and was brought under the wing of Dr. Harold Winston, from whom he derives his name. The doctor taught Winston to value science and his own curiosity, which led him down the path of eventually becoming a brilliant scientist himself. Eventually, however, the other intelligent gorillas led an uprising, killed the human scientists, and took over the colony for themselves. Winston, being somewhat of a bootlicker, fled to Earth, preferring servitude to humans over the self-determination and freedom of his people. Winston is a technocratic liberal, believing that politics should be a sort of meritocracy with academics and scientists at the head of government and decision-making. He is strongly opposed to radical politics and disruption of the status quo, and so he fit right at home in Overwatch when he arrived on Earth. He was the organization's most enthusiastic member until it was disbanded. He exiled himself to Watchpoint Gibraltar until it was attacked by Talon operatives led by Reaper, after which he issued an illegal recall order to reform Overwatch, which he is the current de facto leader of. Dr. Angela Ziegler, also known as Mercy, is a Swiss medic and peace activist. She is one of the most renowned medical doctors in the world and has invented many healing technologies, some of which she has integrated into her own body. Her prominence in the medical field led her to be recruited into Overwatch after the Omnic Crisis as their lead medical researcher. Though she was opposed to the militaristic operations of the organization, she saw the value in furthering her medical research with the state-of-the-art facilities and virtually unlimited budget available to Overwatch, and realized she could save lives on a much greater scale with their help. During her time in Overwatch, she did manage to greatly advance the field of nanobiology, inventing new healing technologies including her Valkyrie suit, and even the ability to bring recently deceased combatants back to life.
Is it possible to learn this power?
Politically, Mercy is the most left-wing member of Overwatch. Unlike most of her comrades, she is vehemently opposed to war, imperialism, and the second-class citizenship bestowed upon Omnics, as well as the capitalist institutions that necessitate all of those evils. She is a socialist that believes everyone deserves dignity and freedom, humans and Omnics alike. Mercy is an active member of the Swiss Party of Labor and has even been approached by them to run for office in the Federal Assembly. Lena Oxton, also known as Tracer, is a British pilot in the Royal Air Force that was recruited into Overwatch at a young age. She was inducted into an advanced flight program which was testing out prototype jets capable of teleportation, but the aircraft malfunctioned during its first flight, leading her to disappear completely. She eventually did reappear, but the malfunction led her to become desynchronized from the flow of time, which caused her to disappear for hours or days at a time, but she was unable to control her time disassociation or even her physical form. Overwatch scientists were unable to fix her condition until Winston was able to design a chronal accelerator which allowed her to control how time interacts with herself, giving her the ability to speed up and slow down time at will. She became one of Overwatch's most effective agents after her accident, as her control of time gave her a great advantage over most opponents. Tracer has a big heart and is a well-meaning liberal. She is sympathetic to the Omnic cause and admired Mondada, a spiritual leader of the Omnics. She was even present during his assassination, which she attempted to prevent. She is a member of the Labour Party despite her distaste for Blairite centrism and supports the Corbyn wing of the party. She is also not transphobic, unlike most people on Turf Island. Mei is a Chinese climate researcher focused on fighting climate change. She was recruited by Overwatch after the Omnic Crisis to study the increasing unexplained climate phenomena which were thought to be related to the growing Omnic population and increased resource consumption. She was assigned to a monitoring station in Antarctica. Shortly after she arrived, a strange polar phenomena struck the base which damaged it and cut off communications to the outside. As the station ran out of supplies, the scientists were forced to go into cryostasis in order to survive. Mei awoke from stasis 9 years later, discovering that Overwatch had been disbanded and the monitoring station had been abandoned long ago. Worse, all the other scientists' cryopods had malfunctioned, leaving her as the sole survivor. She managed to repair the base's antenna and radio systems and made contact with Winston and eventually managed to escape. While Mei is much more interested in science and trying to heal the world than politics, she is a member of the Communist Party of China, where she is held in high regard as a world-renowned scientist. Jesse McCree is a... What's that? He's not called McCree anymore? Why not? He did what? Oh, Jesus, dude. Okay, apparently Jesse McCree is an ex-Blizzard employee that was fired for being some kind of pervert. This character is now called Cassidy. Cassidy is an American gunslinger that is operated on both sides of the law. As a young man, he fell in with a gang of outlaws led by Elizabeth Ashe. The gang pulled off many heists and became both infamous and rich from their crimes. Eventually, the law caught up with them and they were busted in an Overwatch sting operation. Gabriel Reyes noticed that he was an incredibly talented marksman and gave him the option to serve in Blackwatch's Covert Ops division rather than go to a maximum security prison, which he accepted, hoping to atone for his past. He served with Blackwatch for several years, but he saw the fissure between Blackwatch and Overwatch growing long before most and went AWOL before shit hit the fan. After the fall of Overwatch, he went on to become a vigilante and find his own way in the world. Cassidy doesn't really have much in the way of political beliefs beyond a vague, self-reliant conservatism. He watched too many Clint Eastwood movies and played too much Red Dead Redemption 2 when he was younger and basically made that his entire personality. Alexandra Zaryanova is a Russian bodybuilder and soldier. Due to Russian sanctions, she has been removed from the game. Lucio Correa dos Santos is a Brazilian DJ, international celebrity, and freedom fighter. He grew up in the favelas of Rio de Janeiro and discovered his love of music at a young age. After the Omnic Crisis, Vishkar Corporation, a soulless multinational megacorporation, secured contracts to redevelop much of Rio, which had been heavily damaged. This sinister corporation slowly started turning the city into a company town, with curfews, crackdowns on dissent, and exploitative labor practices. Lucio, being a revolutionary communist, did not take this corporate violence upon his city lightly. He expropriated Vishkar's sonic technology and fashioned weapons to fight back with. He became a leader of the Brazilian resistance as they managed to push much of Vishkar's developments out of Rio de Janeiro. His leadership in fighting evil corporate overlords made him very popular, and his music, previously just a hobby, became a global sensation almost overnight. He uses his music to promote positive social change and anti-capitalism, and now fills arenas with people eager to hear his message and be inspired to change their own material situations through armed struggle. Genji Shimada is the brother of Hanzo Shimada, both sons of the leader of the Shimada clan, which is a bunch of ninjas that are involved in organized crime. Genji enjoyed and was talented at the ninja training he received growing up, but wasn't that interested in the family business, preferring to live a life of luxury. When the patriarch of the family passed away, the higher-ups in the clan pressured Hanzo to convince Genji to be more active in the organization, which he had no interest in. The brothers grew apart and eventually came to blows over their disagreements, leading Genji to be severely injured and near death. Hanzo believed he had actually killed his brother, but it turns out he was rescued by Overwatch, who saw Genji as a valuable asset in combating organized crime. He was healed by Mercy, who used nanotechnology and cybernetics to save his life, resulting in a cyborg body that is definitely not a ripoff of Raiden or Grey Fox. He worked with both the main Overwatch force and Blackwatch Special Forces, becoming one of their most accomplished operatives. When they disbanded, he went on a journey of self-discovery where he would meet Zenyatta, who would become a mentor to him. Genji is one of the more apolitical members of Overwatch, caring more about self-improvement and finding inner peace than the squabbles of nations which don't concern him. Hannah Song, better known by her username D.Va, is a Korean professional gamer and Twitch streamer famous for being one of the best and most popular StarCraft 2 players. She eventually retired from professional gaming and moved on to be a Twitch politics streamer. She excelled at this as well, inspiring many others to follow in her footsteps and destroy their political opponents with facts and logic. At first, she mostly debated far-right wingers and was very good at picking apart their arguments and making them look like fools. Over time, however, she drifted further to the right herself and began debating leftists, seeing them as just as bad as right-wingers. Eventually, she was forced to cut this career short as well, as she was indefinitely suspended from Twitch for promoting hatred and harassment of trans people. Her teenage fans have been raging about that on Twitter ever since. When Korea came under attack during the Omnic Crisis, she joined up with Mecha, the mobile exo-force of the Korean army. D.Va admired the work done by Overwatch but never became a member until after it was reformed by Winston when she was given permission by her superior officer. He assured her he would clear things up with the Korean government, who still considered the reformation of Overwatch as against international law. Politically, D.Va is an enlightened centrist that views both sides of the political spectrum as unreasonable. Deep down though, she doesn't really have strong political convictions and just likes arguing with people. She's only a centrist because that provides her with a more target-rich environment. Brigitte Lindholm is a Swedish engineer, daughter of Torbjorn, and squire to Reinhardt. She learned mechanical engineering from spending time in her father's workshops at an early age. Unlike Torbjorn, who focused on the engineering of weapons, Brigitte was always more interested in creating armor. She grew up hearing stories of chivalry and valor from her godfather Reinhardt, and when he decided to become a questing knight again after retiring from Overwatch, she decided to go with him to see the world. While initially tasked with maintaining Reinhardt's armor, over time she felt more of a responsibility to help maintain Reinhardt himself, as he was getting a bit long in the tooth for an adventurer. She knew that he wouldn't be able to keep this sort of lifestyle up forever, and so she built her own armor in secret, eventually revealing it to him and asking him to train her as a warrior, which she was proud to do. Brigitte is wise for her age and sees Overwatch for what it really is. She resents the organization for how it has treated Reinhardt, and while she feels honored to work with the individual members of Overwatch, she knows that it was a corrupt institution that cares more about order and maintaining the status quo than peace and prosperity between Omnics and humans. Jean-Baptiste Augustin is a Haitian combat medic. He was one of tens of millions of children that were orphaned due to the Omnic crisis. He grew up in an orphanage and looked up to Overwatch as a child. He joined the military as a young man, serving as a Special Forces combat medic. After his tour of duty was over, he was looking for similar work and ended up working for Talon. Like many of their operatives, he wasn't aware of some of their more nefarious actions and simply wanted to help people, which was ostensibly the whole point of Talon. As Baptiste spent time in the organization, however, he slowly realized the Force was more interested in profiting from human misery than solving it. His skepticism came to a head during an operation to assassinate a crime lord, which resulted in Talon destroying much of the town and causing massive collateral damage to find him. Having had enough of Talon, he quietly disappeared in a fishing boat. He had to go underground after that, as Talon considered him a rogue agent that knew too much and started sending operatives to silence him, most of which were never seen again. Baptiste spent the next few years lying low, helping people and providing medical care when he could, and eventually crossed paths with Mercy and other members of Overwatch. Baptiste has vaguely left-wing anti-war politics, as he has seen the horrors of war and the lasting effects it has on people, and has dedicated his life to helping them. He's been involved with good and bad organizations and has a pragmatic view about how the world works, and so he views some of the other left-wing members of Overwatch as naive and utopian. Echo is a robot with advanced artificial intelligence created by Overwatch scientist Mina Lau. It has recently gained sentience but hasn't yet developed its own political beliefs. Hopefully it doesn't decide to turn us all into batteries someday.
But wouldn't almost anything make a better battery than a human body? Like a potato? Or a battery?
In addition to the members of Overwatch, the game features several members of Talon, the sinister anarcho-capitalist terrorist organization. Akande Ogundimu, better known by his title Doomfist, is a Nigerian businessman and the current leader of Talon. He was born into a wealthy family and was heir to their prosthetics manufacturing company. He enjoyed martial arts from a young age and won many tournaments in several fighting styles as a young man. Tragedy struck him during the Omnic crisis and he lost his right arm, which his company was able to replace with a powerful prosthetic, but he would be unable to compete in martial arts tournaments as a result of his new advantage. He focused on his business after that, but always longed to be a fighter instead, and his desire was eventually achieved when he was approached by the previous Doomfist, who offered him a mercenary job with Talon. He quickly climbed up the ranks of the organization, culminating in him killing his boss and taking his place as Doomfist and as the leader of Talon. He led the organization to become very profitable, and despite spending a few years in prison after being apprehended by Overwatch, he was eventually sprung loose and is now the leader of Talon again. Doomfist is a shrewd and ruthless anarcho-capitalist, viewing all conflicts, whether in business or otherwise, as competitions of might makes right. He feels no mercy or empathy for the victims of Talon's terrorism and thinks he is making humanity stronger in some twisted sense. Like Reaper, he is a big Ayn Rand fan and views selfishness as a virtue. Amélie Lacroix is a French ballet dancer that was eventually turned into the Talon assassin codenamed Widowmaker. She was married to Gerard Lacroix, who was an Overwatch agent working to undermine Talon, which led to several assassination attempts on him. Due to these failing, Talon eventually switched their focus to his wife, whom they were able to kidnap and brainwash as a Talon sleeper agent. She was then left to be found by Overwatch, who didn't realize the reprogramming had taken place, and she eventually killed her husband in his sleep shortly after. After her mission was complete, she returned to Talon, where she received extensive training, physical modification, and further psychological manipulation, turning her into the killing machine known as Widowmaker. She became their most effective assassin and was responsible for the apparent death of Ana Amari, as well as the actual death of Mandata, the leader of the Shambali, a sort of Omnic Enlightenment movement. Widowmaker has no political views, as she has been brainwashed to only focus on her missions, and doesn't think about much beyond that. Olivia Colomar is a Mexican hacker formerly affiliated with the Los Muertos gang and a current Talon operative. She was one of many children orphaned during the Omnic crisis, as Mexico was one of the hardest hit locations. She was taken in by the Los Muertos gang as she was a hacking prodigy even at a young age. The gang was focused on overthrowing the government, which they believed were focusing on rebuilding the profits of the Mexican bourgeoisie instead of the infrastructure that was desperately needed by its common people. As her ability as a hacker improved, she took on more and more audacious targets, including doxing, exploiting, and deploying viruses against governments, corporations, and powerful capitalists. She eventually bit off more than she could chew and got caught up in a global Illuminati-style conspiracy of powerful people who were watching her as well, and she was forced to delete all traces of her digital footprints and even her identity and went into hiding. Later, she received cybernetic grafts that allowed her to manipulate computers and technology just by touching them, and adopted the moniker Sombra. With her new powers, her hacking skills were immensely more powerful, and she went on a global hacking spree which caught the eye of Talon, and they recruited her for her talents. Politically, Sombra is an individualist anarchist that believes in illegalism, viewing crime as a powerful weapon to undermine corrupt governments, corporations, and other powerful capitalist institutions. She thinks everyone deserves a dignified life and the freedom to do what they want with it, and wants all of humanity to be free from the confines of neoliberal capitalism. She is willing to commit massive crimes and even propaganda of the deed to achieve those ends. Moira O'Dearan is an Irish geneticist, former Blackwatch scientist, and one of the current leaders of Talon. She is first and foremost interested in the advancement of science, willing to go to any length for that cause. In her eyes, ethical norms, such as laws against human experimentation, are petty rules made by cowardly men to stifle progress. Her controversial experiments eventually proved to be too much for the majority of the scientific community, and she was ostracized by them as well as Overwatch for her extremism. This led her to be secretly recruited to Blackwatch by Gabriel Reyes after his fall and re-emergence as Reaper. In fact, it was her experimental treatments that saved his life and gave him his abilities. After Blackwatch was disbanded, she had trouble finding funding for her controversial and expensive research, and so she was easy to poach by Talon, who valued her brilliance and ethical open-mindedness. Moira's political views are as unorthodox as her scientific ones. She is an anarcho-transhumanist, believing that improving the human body and unlocking all the secrets of life are the best way to achieve radical freedom from constructs such as scarcity and mortality. She is way more concerned with uploading consciousness, biological immortality, and actively working towards the technological singularity than the meaningless concerns of politicians and their governments. Sybren de Kuiper is a Dutch astrophysicist. He dedicated his life to furthering the understanding of gravity, culminating in an ambitious experiment on the International Space Station which went horrifically wrong when the containment field surrounding the experiment failed, subjecting him to unexplained gravitational phenomena that shattered his mind. He was returned to Earth and quarantined in a top-secret facility. Due to his ravings about the mysteries of the universe and the strange effects on gravity that emanated from him, he was considered a danger to himself and others. Designated Subject Sigma, he was imprisoned and studied in the facility for many years, where they poked and prodded at him like a lab rat to further understand what had happened to him. Eventually, Talon became aware of him and broke him out of confinement, viewing him as a useful asset to advance their plans. Free from the facility, he slowly mastered the power over gravity that he had always dreamed of, but his mind was irreversibly damaged from the failed experiments on the ISS and the years of solitary confinement and experimentation on him. Like Moira, he is almost completely uninterested in politics, instead preferring to immerse himself in his studies and experiments. In addition to the members of Overwatch and Talon, there are several operatives that are part of neither organization who focus on more personal or local objectives. Faria Amari, better known by her call sign Pharah, is the daughter of Ana Amari. Like her mother and many generations of Amaris before her, she has a strong sense of duty and service. She grew up surrounded by the original members of Overwatch and always looked forward to joining them someday. She got the news of her mother's apparent death when she was only a teenager and joined the Egyptian army shortly after. She was a naturally talented soldier and quickly shot up the ranks to become an officer. She had an exemplary record and was on track to join Overwatch, but unfortunately for her, it was disbanded before she got the chance to join. Eventually, she left the army with a commendation for distinguished service and joined up with a private security company called Helix Security International. She later received Winston's message about getting the band back together, in which she was invited to achieve her dream of joining Overwatch, but by then she was her own woman with her own path to follow rather than that of her mother's, and so she decided to stay with Helix Security. Pharah's politics are those of a cop. She sees the world as filled with bad people who want to inflict misery upon the world and weak people that lack the strength to defend themselves and need the help of strong people like her. She's a big proponent of the Blue Lives Matter movement and views destruction of private property as one of the highest crimes. As with all these videos I make, the character whose political ideologies I disagree with the most somehow end up being the character I like playing the most, and so of course I'm a Pharah main. Hanzo Shimada is a Japanese assassin and former leader of the Shimada crime family. After his duel with his brother Genji, in which he believed he had killed him, Hanzo became stricken with grief and bitter towards the family business which had driven him to such a horrible act. He abandoned his clan despite training his whole life to lead it. Ever since then, he has been wandering, honing his skills as a warrior and trying to find closure for the loss of his brother. On the 10th anniversary of Genji's death, he returned to his old clan's castle to honor his brother's memory, as he did every year. Once at the altar, he began to pray, however he was interrupted by a cyborg ninja. The ninja pointed out the hypocrisy in honoring his brother when he was the one who killed him. Enraged, Hanzo attacked, and the two had a ferocious duel, like the one with Genji so many years ago. Hanzo was pushed onto his back foot as this ninja was a very accomplished swordsman, and so he was forced to use his Dragon Strike ability. Shockingly, it turned out the ninja also had the ability to control dragons, and he parried the strike with ease, sending it back at Hanzo with full force. The blow greatly weakened Hanzo, who fell to his knees just before the ninja presented his wakizashi at Hanzo's throat. "Do it then," said Hanzo, before a pause which felt like a lifetime, but the ninja denied his request, saying Hanzo still had a purpose in his life before calling him brother. Hanzo didn't believe it was possible that this could be Genji until the ninja removed his mask, revealing the scarred but familiar face of his long-lost brother. Genji said that he had forgiven Hanzo and that now Hanzo must forgive himself before vanishing into the darkness. This revelation changed everything for Hanzo, who is now forced to grapple with his own future once again. As far as politics, Hanzo is a paleo-conservative. Respectful of honor, tradition, and family values above all else, he sees the Omnic crisis and the rise and fall of Overwatch as consequences of most people rejecting a simple and traditional life. Elizabeth Caledonia Ashe is an American thief and leader of the Deadlock Gang. She met Cassidy in jail and they became fast friends, leading to them teaming up for her first heist. The heist went off without a hitch and the two teamed up many more times after that, slowly adding members to their nascent gang until it had become one of the most successful and infamous gangs in the Southwest US. This eventually led to tension and violence with other gangs who were unhappy to share territory and scores with these young upstarts. Ashe decided to call a meeting with the heads of all the gangs in the area, and with her natural charisma and business skills, she managed to convince them all to work together and respect each other's territory. This led to an even more profitable situation for all involved. Eventually, Cassidy was captured in an Overwatch sting and left the gang to join them. This was tragic to Ashe as they were close, but she was determined to forge ahead without him. Ashe considers politics to be a silly game for normal people that don't have the willpower to take what they want and live how they wish. She believes that might makes right and that if you don't have the will or ability to protect what is yours, then you don't deserve it. Her upbringing as a rich kid that got everything she wanted except for a close bond with her family shaped her worldview, leading her to feel entitled to what she steals from others but yearning for close bonds with others. For this reason, she still feels close with Cassidy despite them being on opposite sides of the law now. Bastion was a frontline combatant in the Omnic crisis and the last remaining unit of his kind, as the rest were destroyed after the war. Programmed to fight in the Omnic attack on Stuttgart, Germany, Bastion wasn't in the battle for long as it was heavily damaged early on in the fighting. It lay deactivated in the forests of Germany for over 10 years, slowly becoming encased in moss and blending into the forest. Eventually, a bird, which Bastion designated Ganymede, decided that Bastion's wrecked frame would make a fine place for a nest. While building the nest, the bird reactivated Bastion, who recalled his programming and began heading towards its target. Along the way, it was taken in by the beauty of the forest and the animals within. Suddenly, Bastion's defensive protocols were activated as it sensed what sounded like gunfire deep within the forest. Within seconds, Bastion deployed its turret mode and mowed down a portion of the forest. Reverting back to standard protocols, Bastion realized the destruction it had wrought upon the natural beauty of the forest it had come to appreciate, including the dismantling of its new friend's nest. Dismayed but resolute in its mission, it continued on to the edge of the forest, where its visual sensors detected the target off in the distance. Looking back at the serene forest one last time before executing its mission, Bastion tripped on something. It was a bullet-riddled Bastion model just like him. Upon surveying the area further, it noticed this field was a graveyard of its kind. It downloaded video playback of the Bastion unit's mission and calculated that these units had all been decommissioned in the mission Bastion was attempting to carry out long ago. Determined to complete the mission where those units had failed, Bastion began marching forwards, but then something anomalous happened. The bird whose nest it had accidentally destroyed landed upon its hardware, and a calculation was made deep in its code. Bastion rewrote its prime directive. Rather than carry out its mission for the sake of its creators that had most likely been decommissioned by that time, Bastion decided to integrate into the forest and operate according to its own directives. Bastion is a green anarchist as it rejects the hierarchical programming given to it by its creators, instead choosing to execute a program of liberation and conservation of the ecosystem. Satya Vaswani, also known as Symmetra, is an Indian architect and corporate agent for the Vishkar Corporation. She was present in Rio de Janeiro when Vishkar was attempting to secure contracts to redevelop the city, where she personally took part in corporate sabotage against a competing company. When she was unable to get the dirt on her rivals that she was looking for, another Vishkar corporate agent simply blew up the rival company's HQ, which led to fires that burned down part of the favelas. It's no wonder Lucio was able to rally support to push back against Vishkar's influence due to their irresponsibility and recklessness with human lives. Symmetra is a dyed-in-the-wool neoliberal, believing that deregulated markets are the solution to everything and that massive social ills such as homelessness, lack of healthcare, and income inequality can be solved by making sure the right people are in charge and the right tax breaks are given to the right NGOs. She isn't outright malicious as much as naive about how governments and institutions within capitalism operate, believing that corporations pursuing record profits above all else and doing what is best for humanity are somehow reconcilable. Tekarta Zenyatta is an Omnic that is wandering the world seeking enlightenment. He was a former member of the Shambali but left the group due to differences in opinion on what he saw as their rigid and dogmatic teachings. He has become somewhat of a spiritual mentor to Genji, who is conflicted about his cyborg body, but through Zenyatta's teachings he has come to peace with his humanity despite being more machine than man. While his selflessness and desire to help people are noble, Zenyatta is a bit of a liberal. He believes that spiritual healing and guidance are solutions to material problems that people face. Enlightenment might put someone who is homeless or hungry at peace about their predicament, but it won't put a roof over their head or food in their belly. Between his focus on spirituality, fixation on orbs, and half-measured solutions to human suffering, he kind of reminds me of Marianne Williamson. Jameson Fox and Mako Rutledge, better known by their nicknames Junkrat and Roadhog, are Australian anarchists, partners in crime, and members of the Australian Liberation Front. Australia was hit harder than almost anywhere on Earth in the Omnic crisis, and as a result, the Australian government gave a large chunk of the outback to the Omnics as a peace concession. This led to mass displacement of the people who lived there, as their homes and lands were all of a sudden taken from them and they became subject to Omnic laws. This, of course, led to tension between the two groups, as well as the formation of the Australian Liberation Front, which seeks to fight back and retake their lands from Omnics. This culminated in the sabotage of the fusion core which powered the Omnium, resulting in an explosion which irradiated the area and littered debris all over the outback, which now looks even more like a post-apocalyptic Mad Max situation than it did before. After having fun in the lawless outback for a while, Junkrat and Roadhog went on an international crime spree which included robberies, arson, and a heist of the United Kingdom's crown jewels. They became wanted fugitives in many countries and accrued a bounty of $25 million for their capture. As two of the world's most effective and ruthless criminals, they were never caught and currently reside back in the Australian outback. Politically, Junkrat and Roadhog are individualist anarchists and illegalists similar to Sombra, but unlike Sombra, it isn't because of philosophical or ideological reasons. They are just crazy Australians that don't like being told what to do or having anyone in charge of them. They find themselves right at home in the now lawless outback. Hammond is a very large, super intelligent hamster that was raised in the same lunar colony as Winston. They became close while they lived there and got along better than they did with any of the other animals there. When the guerrillas had their revolution and took over the colony, Hammond was just as uninterested in sticking around as Winston, and so he used the mechanical skills he had slowly been developing to build an escape craft, which he attached to Winston's. Once they had reached Earth's atmosphere, however, the tether between the two broke, and Hammond's craft was separated from Winston's, landing in the Australian outback. He managed to retrofit his escape craft into a crude mech which would help him survive the harsh outback as well as greatly increase his physical strength, which he took advantage of in the mech battle arena of the Scrapyard, which is a place Australians go to blow off steam. He went from unknown challenger called Wrecking Ball to champion of the arena in short order due to his advanced mechanical skills, and was able to use his winnings to further increase the capabilities of his mech. With these upgrades, he was able to leave the outback and travel the world, which he found fascinating and much more fun than living in a cage on the moon. Hammond is only 14 years old, so he doesn't have much of his own political ideology. He has absorbed some reactionary views from getting all of his political information from Reddit and Twitch streamers, but hopefully he grows out of that. Orisa is a newly created Omnic created by Ify Oladeli, a young girl from Numbani. Orisa was only made a month ago and is still undergoing basic testing and programming, so she doesn't have much history, much less political views. Ify, however, has the sort of utopian socialist beliefs that most children have. If you've spent time with children, or were ever one yourself, you're probably familiar with the sort of innocent sense of justice they have. If a child sees a homeless person, they may ask their parents why that person has to sleep on the street, and the parent may answer in a way that shields the child from the harsh reality of life or obfuscate how someone could end up like that to protect the child's sensibilities. But to the child, this will probably be an unsatisfactory answer, which leads to the question, why don't we just give them a home? Which will be even more difficult for the parent to answer. No one wants to tell their children that the capitalist world we live in is inherently exploitative, that most people's lives are so precarious that they are a few bad days from ending up destitute, or that there are evil men in the world that profit from the misery of others, and homelessness, inequality, and hunger exist because some people profit from it and want it to continue. That sense of justice and desire to help people in need led Effie to create Orisa and program her to right the wrongs of the world. Hopefully, she can maintain the optimism and innocent desire to implement the simple and obvious solutions to the world's ills that most people lose sight of as they grow older, more cynical, and more accepting of injustice. Thanks for watching and staying to the end of what turned out to be a much longer video than I originally planned. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video to help the channel grow, and check out some of my other videos as well. I've got ones on how Yoshi is an anarcho-communist, why Donkey Kong Country is an allusion to Lenin's imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism, and other videos like this where I go over the political ideologies of various characters in video games. Thanks again. Peace.